My father raised his wine glass to my sister and announced she'd earned everything on her own. Unlike me. Then he laughed a careless, easy laugh. Like I was a punchline he'd told 100 times. So I set down my water glass, looked him dead in the eye, and said 6 quiet words that turned his perfect family dinner into a crime scene. Then I'll stop sending you money. The fork clattered from Caroline's hand. My mother's smile froze midair. A drop of gravy trembling off her spoon. And Richard Cole, the man who'd decided his daughter's worth since the day we were born, just blinked at me. Genuinely confused. Because he had no idea I'd been wiring $4. 000 a month into his golden daughter's bank account for 15 months. 60美元. 000 of my own money. Money I'd earned at my little hobby accounting firm while he was calling it a waste of time. Money meant to save the house he was about to lose in foreclosure. Money that never reached the bank. Not once. My name is Madison Cole. I'm Altusbear. And this is the story of how one sentence shattered the perfect Cole family and how the invisible daughter turned out to be the only one holding it together. From the outside, we were the perfect family. I mean that literally we were the family on the Christmas cards. The ones in the matching sweaters. Smiling like we actually meant it. The Coles. The 2-story house in the good Dallas neighborhood. The one with the green lawn and the roses Mom planted every spring like she was painting a picture she'd never finish. Our neighbors called us the ideal family. They saw us at Sunday barbecues. Dad washing his car in the driveway. Mom bringing over cookies still warm from the oven. They saw Caroline and me. The 2 perfect daughters. Side by side. They saw everything they wanted to see. What they never saw was what happened when the front door clicked shut. A house is just walls. A smile can hide anything. Our house was filled with a silence so loud it pressed against your ears. So heavy it sat on your chest like a weight you learned to carry. It was stuffed with all the things we never said aloud. The resentments. The comparisons. The casual cruelties that got written off as jokes. People talk about cracks in a family like they're something that forms over time. Like hairline fractures in a foundation, but cracks in a family aren't the cracks. They're the foundation. You build everything on top of them. You just don't know it until the whole thing starts to shift. Mom kept the house immaculate. She kept the flower beds perfect. She kept the dinner table set and the glasses polished and the smiles in place. She kept us looking like we belonged on a magazine cover. And Dad. Richard Cole. He kept the score. Somewhere along the way, our family stopped being a family and became a performance, and I had the lead role no one wanted. The role of the quiet one, the reliable one. The one who shows up, smiles politely, and asks for nothing. I was the wallpaper of the Cole family. Invisible and taken for granted. People thought they knew us. They thought the Coles were blessed. Lucky. The family in the neighborhood who had it all figured out, but they only saw the stage. Never what it cost to keep the curtain from rising. I used to wonder if we'd ever been different. If there was a version of us where love was real and not a transaction. And in a strange way, that question is what this family was built on, not love. Not trust. But the silent agreement that we would never ask it aloud. Richard Cole didn't just run our family, he managed it. Like a CEO. His voice was the only one that mattered at the dinner table. And whatever he didn't understand, he flattened. He was loud. He was proud. And he was impossible to please. In his world, there were winners and losers. And he decided who was who. He loved to talk about achievements, about success, about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, but his standards were always moving. Every family dinner felt like a performance review. And I always failed. Madison, why is your car still 3 years old? Don't you want to project success, Madison? Your hair is simple. You should try to look more like your sister. Madison. That little firm of yours, is it still a hobby? Or are you making real money yet? He didn't understand quiet. He didn't understand steady. And he didn't understand that his little hobby was my entire life. I owned my own accounting firm in Dallas. I built it from nothing, started in a tiny apartment with a secondhand laptop and a business plan I wrote on napkins. Now, I had a small office downtown. 3 employees. And clients who trusted me. My work paid my mortgage. My car loan. And my bills with plenty left over. But to my father, none of that counted. Because it wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't his kind of success. My mother, Susan, was the opposite. She was gentle. She was kind. And she was exhausted, the family translator. She spent her entire life translating Dad's arrogance into apologies. When he snapped at me, "That's a stupid idea. Madison." She'd rush in later, "He's just stressed." "Dear, he doesn't mean it." When he ignored my victories, she'd squeeze my hand. "He's proud of you. He just doesn't know how to show it." She apologized for him so often that her apologies started to sound like excuses. Have you ever known someone who could make you feel small with just a look? A tone. A joke at your expense, and then convinced everyone else that you were the problem for feeling it. Dad was the kind of man who needed to be right the way other people need to breathe. If he couldn't be the smartest person in the room, he lowered the room. And when I sat across from him at dinner, watching him raise his glass to Caroline, while I swallowed every insult like a pill I'd been taking my whole life, I played my part perfectly. The obedient daughter. The wallpaper. The one who paid for her own meal. The truth was, he had decided long ago who I was, and he never once asked who I might become. My safe space was numbers. I know that sounds like a strange thing for a 3-1-year-old woman to say, but numbers were the only thing in my life that never lied to me. 2 + 2 always equals 4. It never changes its mind. It never tells you you're not good enough. Or that your sister did it better. Or that your little firm is just a hobby. It just is. And that honesty, that clean, dependable truth was everything to me. Because I never got it from my family. I built my accounting firm from absolutely nothing. Not a loan from Dad. Not a connection through one of his friends. Not a leg up from anyone. I started in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in Dallas with a second-hand laptop I bought off a guy from my old job. And a business plan I wrote on napkins at a coffee shop that let me sit for hours on a single refill. I remember the first time I filed a tax return for a real client, my hands were shaking so badly I nearly typed the numbers in wrong. But I double-checked them. Then I triple-checked them. Because the thing about being an accountant is that you're only as good as your attention to detail. And attention to detail was the only thing my father ever drilled into me that I actually kept over the years. The firm grew. Not overnight. Not dramatically slowly. Steadily. The way real things grow. I got a small office downtown with a window that faced a parking garage. And I didn't care. Because it was mine. I hired 3 employees, Maria. Who handles payroll like it's poetry? Josh? Who can find a deduction in a pile of chaos? And Dana? Who keeps us all sane when the IRS sends one of those letters that makes your stomach drop? I had clients who trusted me. Real people. Small business owners. Families who needed someone to tell them the truth about their money, and I was good at it. Really good. My practice paid my mortgage. It paid my car loan, the one for the simple 3-year-old car Dad made fun of at dinner. It paid my bills with plenty left over to set aside. I was stable. I was proud of myself. Quietly, but to my father, it was Madison's little hobby. He said it like it was a crossword puzzle I liked to do on weekends. It didn't matter that my hobby paid for my entire life. It didn't matter that my hobby was more successful than his commercial real estate business in a global pandemic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't his kind of success. His kind of success had a title and a corner office and a company car. His kind of success had to be announced. Mine just showed up on time and balanced to the penny. I learned to stop sharing the wins at the dinner table. I learned to say the firm is fine and leave it there. I learned to let him believe the lie he needed to believe that I was the quiet one. The average one. The one who was still figuring it out. Because the truth was too big. Too solid. Too real. And he wouldn't have known what to do with it anyway. So I kept my numbers clean. My loyalty to myself. And my mouth shut. I just showed up. Smiled politely. And paid for my own meal. That was the role I played. The obedient daughter. The reliable one. The invisible one. But even wallpaper has a backside. And mine was covered in numbers. And then there was my mother. Susan. If I was the invisible one, she was the ghost. She moved through rooms so quietly you'd forget she was there. She'd learned to take up as little space as possible. Her eyes carried a tiredness that had nothing to do with sleep. It was the exhaustion of a woman who'd spent 30 years managing someone else's moods. She was gentle. So gentle it hurt to watch. And she was the family translator. That was her real job. When Dad snapped at me at dinner, "That's a stupid idea." Madison, she'd find me later in the kitchen and say, in that soft, careful voice of hers, "He's just stressed. Dear, he doesn't mean it." When he ignored a success I'd worked months for, she'd squeeze my hand under the table and whisper, "He's busy. He's proud of you. He just doesn't know how to show it." She spent her entire life translating his arrogance into apologies, his cruelty into carelessness. She was the peacemaker. But peace in our house never meant harmony. It just meant keeping Richard calm. I remember the afternoon I found the easel. It was a Sunday. About 9 years ago. And I was in the attic searching for old tax documents. There it was. Pushed behind a stack of Christmas decorations. A wooden easel. Folded. Covered in a dusty white sheet. I lifted the sheet and saw tubes of dried paint in a shoebox. And a canvas leaning against the wall half finished. It was a landscape. A lake surrounded by trees. With a sky painted in soft pink and orange. Like the moment before sunrise. I recognized it. A place we used to go when I was a kid. I carried it downstairs. "Mom." "What's this?" Her face went still. She looked at the canvas like she was staring at a stranger. "Oh," she said. "That's old. I used to paint. Before." She didn't finish. But I knew what came after that word. Before she married Richard. Before she became the translator. Before she learned that the only way to keep peace was to give up every piece of herself. One brushstroke at a time. She hadn't touched a brush in 20 years. And standing there in the kitchen light, she looked like she'd forgotten that woman entirely. I asked her once why she stopped. We were sitting on the back porch at dusk. Shelling peas. She looked at the garden and said, very quietly, there wasn't room for both of us. That was all. She had slowly disappeared. Becoming a ghost in her own home. Her only job to manage the moods of the man she married. And I watched her do it. And I felt myself starting to disappear too. And then there was Caroline. 2 years older. And she didn't just walk into a room, she took it over. She was the sun. And everyone in our family orbited around her like we were, planets desperate for warmth. She was loud in the way Dad was loud. Confident in the way he demanded. Flashy in the way he worshipped. She worked at a big marketing firm, a job Dad got her through one of his old buddies, drove a brand new company car, wore clothes that looked like they cost more than my rent. And she knew exactly how to work him. She laughed at his jokes a half second before the punchline. Mirrored his opinions like she'd rehearsed them in the mirror. Tilted her head when he talked, so he felt like a genius. She made him feel like the king he believed himself to be. He saw himself reflected in her. Polished and distortion-free. And he loved her for it. She was also a magpie. That's the only word for it. She loved shiny things. And if you had something shiny, she wanted it. Your new sweater. Your new idea at dinner? Your new friend, she'd take it. Wear it. Show it off. And when she got bored, she'd break it. Just to see the pieces fall. She broke a lot of things growing up. I just happened to be standing nearby. If Caroline broke a vase, I was blamed for leaving it on the table. If she failed a test, the teacher was an idiot. If she dented the car, I distracted her from the passenger seat. The math was simple. Caroline was perfect. So her mistakes weren't her mistakes. They were mine. I learned that lesson so young I don't remember the first time it happened. It was just the weather of our childhood. She lived in the spotlight. And it was warm there. She soaked it all up. I lived in the shadows. Because it was safer. Have you ever known? Deep in your bones. That you don't matter. That the world you live in only has room for one daughter. And it's not you. While Caroline collected applause for being loud, I was in my room studying. While she went to parties, I was building a business plan. While she got titles handed to her, I was building a life from scratch. I paid for my own car, my own apartment, my own mistakes. I was the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who showed up to every family dinner with a polite smile and never asked for anything in return. I was the wallpaper, beautiful from a distance, invisible up close, and I played my part perfectly. Right up until the night I finally tore the whole house down. 6 months before the pandemic, I walked into Sunday dinner with news that should have changed everything. I had just signed the Henderson account. It was the biggest client of my entire career, a contract that would double my firm's revenue overnight. I'd spent 6 weeks on the proposal, working until 2 a.m. most nights, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours earlier, triple-checking every single number until my eyes burned. I didn't tell anyone I was working on it. I wanted to see the look on my father's face when I delivered it. Finished. The dinner was the usual show. Caroline was telling some story about her office. Her voice pitched perfectly for Dad's attention. He was laughing before she even got to the punchline. Mom was passing the potatoes like she was afraid of making a sound. I waited for a pause, my heart hammering. I have some good news, I said, my voice too loud in the quiet. I landed the Henderson account today. Dad was already cutting his steak. He didn't look up. What's that? Good for you. Madison. And just like that, he turned back to Caroline. So then, what did your boss say? My face burned. The moment I'd been carrying like a trophy for 6 weeks vanished into the space between us. Dad, this is a really big deal, I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. Caroline reached across the table and patted my hand. Her rings were cold. Oh, Maddie, that's great. I'm so proud of you for trying so hard with your little business. Trying. I wasn't trying. I had done it. I had signed a client that would double my revenue. And my sister was talking to me like I was a child who'd brought home a crayon drawing. I looked at Mom. She gave me that small, sad smile, the one that said everything and nothing. He's just busy. Dear, have you ever had a moment where you realize the people who are supposed to see you just don't? Where you've spent years building something real, and the only response is a pat on the head from a sister who's never worked a day for anything in her life. I didn't say anything else that night. I just nodded, ate my food, and let the burning in my chest die down to a dull ache I'd learned to carry. That was the night I stopped sharing. I stopped sharing my successes. I stopped sharing my failures. I stopped sharing anything that mattered. It was safer to be the quiet one, the reliable one, the invisible one. I was the wallpaper. I showed up. smiled politely, and paid for my own meal. And I kept playing my part through the holidays, through the birthdays, right up until the world shut down, right up until my father's perfect world collapsed. And they all turned to me. Not to Madison, the daughter, to Madison, the bank. When the world shut down, my father's world collapsed with it. His business was commercial real estate big. Shiny office buildings with glass facades and power lunches and handshakes that closed deals over expensive whiskey. Richard Cole was the man who made things happen. And then, overnight, no one was in offices. No one was making deals. The downtown towers he'd built his empire on went quiet, and so did he. At first, he called it a pause. It's temporary. Madison, he'd say over the phone, his voice too loud, like he could bully a global pandemic into submission. These people will get sick of their living rooms. They'll be begging to come back to the office by summer. I'd listen, my phone wedged between my ear and shoulder, my fingers still moving across my keyboard. It wasn't worth arguing. By summer, the offices were still empty. His voice got quieter. He stopped talking about deals and started talking about idiot politicians ruining the economy. He spent his days closed in his home office, the muffled sound of cable news seeping through the door like smoke. Meanwhile, my little hobby, the one he'd mocked at every dinner, suddenly became essential. I know that sounds like a strange thing to say about accounting, but when an entire economy froze, accountants were the ones everyone called. Small businesses I'd never met were flooding my voicemail, desperate for help with emergency loans, with payroll, with figuring out how to stay alive. My 3 employees and I worked from our homes 6-hour days. The same relentless rhythm. I remember waking up at 5:40 a.m., my phone already glowing with messages, and not looking up from my screen until my neighbor's dog started barking at 9 p.m. I was exhausted, in a way I'd never been, but I was stable. My numbers were still clean. They still added up. Have you ever been the only one holding things together while everyone around you is falling apart and they still can't see it? It was during those months that I realized something I'd never fully understood before. All those ordinary choices I'd made that my father treated as failures, the boring clients, the steady growth, the rainy day savings instead of flashy cars weren't the choices of someone who lacked ambition. They were the choices of someone who wanted to be free. And while my father was losing his empire to a virus, he couldn't shout down. My little firm kept my employees paid, my clients afloat, and my own life intact. I wasn't the wallpaper anymore. I was the one holding the wall up. But my family had no idea. Not yet. Anyway, that would come later with a phone call from my mother, whispering a secret that would change everything. It came on a Thursday at 7:43 p.m. I was still at my desk, laptop glowing with spreadsheets, when the phone buzzed with Mom's name. We had a standing call every Sunday short. Careful, full of polite silence. She never called on Thursdays. So my stomach already knew something was wrong before my brain caught up. "Don't tell your father I'm calling," she whispered. Her voice was thin, frayed, like a thread about to snap. I set my pen down. "Mom, what's wrong?" She didn't answer right away. I heard her breathing short. Shallow breaths, the kind that come before tears. Then, so quiet I almost missed it, they're talking about the house. Maddie, the bank. My blood went cold. What about the house? He's missed payments. 3 of them. Her voice cracked. He told me he was handling it. He said he had savings, that it was just a cash flow problem. But I found a letter. Maddie, in his briefcase, a foreclosure notice. I closed my eyes. 3 missed payments wasn't a cash flow problem. It was a sinking ship. and my father had been standing on the deck pretending the water was a mirage. He's so proud. Mom sobbed. He can't. He won't take help. You know him. He'd rather lose everything than admit he failed. That was Richard Cole in one sentence. He'd rather watch the bank take the roof off my mother's head than accept a single dollar from me. From me, especially the daughter with the little hobby. The daughter who wasn't Caroline. I thought about the roses she'd planted in the front yard every spring for 20 years. The easel in the attic. Covered in a dusty sheet. Untouched since I was a kid. Her hands. Trembling around the phone. And something inside me went very still. I'll handle it. Mom, I said. My voice came out steady, the accountant's voice. The one I used when a client's whole world was collapsing and somebody needed to be calm. He won't know. I'll fix it. How he'll yell. He'll throw you out. He won't know. I repeated. Silence. Then. Barely a whisper. You do that. After everything. Yes. Mom, I'd do that for you. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. Staring at the wall. My father had spent 30 years telling me I wasn't enough. He had watched me build a business from nothing and called it a hobby. And now the only thing standing between my mother and the street was me. The invisible one. The wallpaper. The unlike you daughter. I opened my bank app and looked at my balance. I wasn't rich, I was careful. The way I'd always been. But I had enough. Just barely enough. And I knew, with a certainty that settled into my bones like stone, that I would spend every last dollar of it, if that's what it took to keep that house. But money wasn't the hard part. The hard part was my father's pride. He'd never cash a check from me, he'd burn it first. So the money had to come through someone he actually trusted. There was only one person that could be. I already knew who it was before I even reached for my phone. And the knowing made my stomach turn. I already knew who it was before I even reached for my phone. And the knowing made my stomach turn. Because there was only one person Dad would accept money from. His golden girl. The one who could do no wrong. Caroline. I called her on a Friday night at 9:17. She answered on the 5th ring. Breathless. Like she'd just finished something important. Maddie, what's up? Her voice was light. Breze. The voice she used with people she didn't need to impress. Dad's about to lose the house. I didn't soften it. I just said it. The line went quiet for a long 2 seconds. Then. Flat. Disbelieving what no. He said he was fine. He said he had it under control. He's not. He's 3 months behind on the mortgage. Mom found a foreclosure notice in his briefcase. I could hear the faint clink of ice in a glass on her end. She was drinking wine. I was staring at my ceiling. 3 months. She still didn't sound scared. She sounded annoyed. Like Dad had embarrassed her. That's ridiculous. What are we supposed to do? I hated that we. Hated it with my whole chest. I'm going to pay it. I said. Every month. Until he's back on his feet. But he can never know it's from me. Why not? You're his daughter. Because you know exactly what he'd do if he found out his loser daughter was bailing him out. He'd rather lose the house than admit he needed my help. She was quiet again. I could hear the gears turning. Then she said, slowly, like she was solving a puzzle. You're right. He'd be humiliated. He'd never accept it. So I need a middleman. Someone he trusts. Someone who can tell him they're restructuring his finances. Managing his accounts. Someone he'll say yes to without a fight. It hung between us. I didn't have to say her name. She knew. You want me to take the money and give it to them. Her voice shifted. I could hear the smile coming. Not kindness. Opportunity. Like I found a way to save them through my firm. Yes. Cash. Every month. We keep it clean. You tell them you're handling it. That it's a loan from your company. Something official, He'll believe you. He believes everything you say. I could almost hear her preening on the other end. Yeah. That's smart. Maddie, that's a really good plan. And then, sweet as poison. We're family. We have to protect him. Send me your routing number, no. Just wire it to my account. It's cleaner that way. I'll handle everything. You don't worry about a thing. I sat there after we hung up, the phone still buzzing in my hand. I had just handed my father's pride, my mother's safety, and $4,000 a month to the one person in the family who had never once put anyone before herself. Have you ever made a deal you knew was going to come back and bite you? But you made it anyway because there was no better option. That's what it felt like. I was building a lie. A clean, orderly, carefully structured lie. And the worst part, I was the one who had to make sure it held. So I opened my banking app. The first of the month was 3 days away. I set up the automatic transfer $4. Ling ling ling. Monthly. From my account to hers. The screen asked me to confirm. I stared at that button for a long time. My thumb hovered. Then I pressed it. And like that, the invisible daughter became the family's silent bank. All I asked in return was that no one ever know. The first transfer went out on the first of the month. Right on schedule. Just like I'd set it up. The second followed 30 days later. The third after that. By month 4, I'd stopped noticing the $4. 000. Leaving my account, or maybe I just learned to live with it. The way you learn to live with a low-grade headache that never quite goes away. That first week, I texted Caroline. Did you give them the money? 6 hours later, her reply came back, handled. Mom and Dad said to thank me. They're so relieved. I told them I was restructuring their debt. Not you. Me. That thank me caught in my throat like a fishbone. But I swallowed it. This was for my mother. This was to keep the peace. And peace, I told myself, was worth $4. 000 a month. And for a while, it actually worked. Sunday dinners changed. Mom seemed lighter. Like someone had lifted a weight off her shoulders. She'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. Dad's panic faded into something close to contentment. He stopped ranting about the politicians and started complaining about his golf swing again. In our house, that was practically joy. Have you ever paid for peace and told yourself it was worth every penny? While some quiet voice in your gut kept whispering that it wasn't peace you were buying. Just time. Then came the toasts. By the third month, Dad was raising his glass to Caroline at nearly every dinner. Your sister, he'd say, nodding toward me like I was an audience of one. She's a miracle worker. Smart as a whip. She's been restructuring our finances. Getting us through this mess? She's got a real head for numbers. And Caroline would dip her head. That saintly, modest smile on her face. And say, "Oh, Dad, it's nothing. I'm just happy to help. We're family." Then her eyes would flick to mine just for a second, and that tiny, almost invisible smirk would appear. It said, "I'm the star. You're the audience. Keep the money coming." I told myself it was worth it. I told myself that when she pulled up in a brand new car company perk, I told myself that when she posted photos from a beach in Mexico, work conference, I told myself that every single month when the bank confirmation flashed across my screen, I told myself that for 15 months, 15 transfers, Liu Shimeiyuan. 000 of my own money earned at a little hobby my father couldn't even be bothered to remember the name of. And here's what 15 months taught me: peace bought with deceit never lasts. It just rots from the inside out quietly, patiently, until one careless sentence makes the whole rotten thing collapse. The careless sentence came on a random Tuesday, 5 days after the 15th transfer hit Caroline's account. That night felt normal, which in our family meant tense. Mom had made a roast beef, the way she always did when she was nervous about something she couldn't name. The dining room was freshly polished. The mahogany table set with the good china we only used on special occasions. I noticed, and I should have known something was coming. Dad was in a great mood. A warning sign. I know now. But I was too tired to read it. He'd just poured himself a second, very large glass of red wine, and his voice was already loud with it. I'm telling you, Susan, this is the year. The market's coming back. People are tired of their spare bedrooms. I've got 2 big clients circling the downtown properties. Mom smiled tightly and passed the potatoes without a word. Caroline was glowing. That's the only word for it. She wore a new silk blouse, the color of champagne. And she looked like money. She looked like she didn't have a care in the world. It's true. Maddie, she said, reaching across the table to touch my wrist, a gesture so rehearsed it felt like a scene. Dad's been working so hard. We've been managing. It's been tough, but we've handled it. There it was. We. As if she'd been the one staring at spreadsheets at 3 a.m., as if she'd built anything with her own hands. I just nodded. That's great. Caroline. I picked up my fork and thought about the bank confirmation I'd seen that morning. 4美元. Ling ling ling. Clean. Orderly. Gone. I should have kept my mouth shut. I should have just eaten my roast beef and stayed the wallpaper I'd had decades of practice. But Dad wasn't done. He raised his wine glass. His face flushed with pride and alcohol. A toast, he said. And the clink of his spoon against crystal brought the table to a standstill. Mom picked up her water glass. I picked up mine. To my daughter. Caroline. Your mother and I, we wouldn't have made it through this mess without you. You've been managing the mortgage. You've been paying the bills. You've done it all on your own. The air in the room turned to glass. All on her own. I stopped breathing. Then he turned his gaze to me. It wasn't mean that's what made it worse. It was careless. Casual. The pity you'd give a stranger's lost dog. He laughed. A short, sharp laugh. He didn't try to soften. Your sister earned everything on her own. Unlike you? Have you ever watched your entire life get reduced to a punchline at a dinner table? That single sentence was a fire. It burned through every late night I'd worked. Every dollar I'd sent. Every insult I'd swallowed in 31 years. I didn't say a word. I just set my water glass down so slowly it made no sound at all. The lie didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. It came out polished. Effortless. Practiced like a line he'd rehearsed 100 family dinners ago. And one Caroline had learned to catch in her hands like a prize. She dipped her head in that modest, saintly bow she'd perfected over the years. Her chin dropping just enough to look humble. Letting the praise settle over her like a spotlight she'd always known was hers. A hero. A winner. Waiting for applause. The worst part wasn't that she was accepting the lie. She was expecting it. The expectation was carved so deeply into her that she'd started believing the fantasy herself. The images came to me then. Sharp and quick as photographs. My tiny apartment with the busted heater. The secondhand laptop with the cracked screen. Its charger held at exactly the right angle to keep it alive. The business plan on napkins. Edges stained with coffee rings. The first client. The 10th. The 100th. 16-hour days during the pandemic, while my father sat in his office and called my work a hobby. And then the transfers, 15 of them. 4美元. 000 every single time. $60,000 of my own earned money. Leaving my account on the first of each month after month. While the woman accepting this toast was somewhere spending it, The slow burn that had lived in my chest for 31 years rose up through my stomach and settled at the base of my throat. It was hot. It was heavy. It was familiar, the same fire I'd swallowed 1,000 times before. The same taste of ash I'd learned to live with. I knew how to do it again. I was the expert. I'd spent my whole life shrinking into the wallpaper, letting my father's words roll off my back, standing quiet while everyone else took the credit for my work. I could do it one more night. Just one more. But something inside me, a piece of my spine I didn't even know existed, turned to steel. I looked at my father. Still smiling. Glass still raised. Waiting for me to nod along like I always did. I looked at Mom. Her smile had frozen on her face. Her eyes wide and begging me not to break the spell. Then I looked at my sister. Glowing in her silk blouse, like she'd personally dragged our family out of the fire, and my mouth opened before I could stop it. Then I'll stop sending you money. 6 words. Quiet. So quiet they barely made it across the table. They landed in the middle of that polished mahogany table, like a bomb. For one endless second. Nothing moved. Nobody breathed. The words just hovered in the air between the roast beef and the gravy boat. Smoking. Waiting for the blast. The silence was instant. It was complete. It had a physical weight. Like the air itself had turned to glass. Mom's hand trembled on the gravy ladle. A single drop of brown gravy wobbled, then fell onto her white tablecloth, leaving a small dark stain spreading into the fabric. She stared at it like it was a spider frozen, terrified to move. As if the whole room depended on her staying perfectly still, Caroline's fork slipped from her fingers. It clinked against the side of her plate, loud and sharp in all that stillness, and fell into her lap. Her face went from glowing tan to pasty white in a second. The smirk was gone. Dad blinked. His proud smile froze mid-toast, like a statue cracking from the inside. He looked at me. And the thing that broke me most was that he wasn't angry. He was confused. Genuinely. Completely puzzled. What money? What are you talking about? And in that second, I understood. He wasn't in on it. He wasn't protecting her. Wasn't covering for her. Wasn't pretending. He truly, completely believed Caroline was the star who'd saved the family. Every toast. Every miracle worker. Every proud glance. He'd been worshipping a lie. And I'd been the one paying for that worship. Month after month, Caroline tried to laugh it off. Maddie's just stressed. She doesn't know what she's saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Caroline. My voice came out quiet and clear. And I saw her face go tight with fear. I'm talking about the money. The money I've been sending. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The accountant in me, the part that always kept records, had the banking app open before anyone could speak again. Ask her about the $4. Ling ling ling. The $4. 000. I've been wiring to her bank account on the 1st of every month for the last 15 months. I scrolled slowly. One transfer. Another. Another. 15 of them. Each one time-stamped. Each one clean as a confession. I turned the screen so Dad could see every line. The bomb had gone off. We were all standing in the rubble, breathing in the smoke. Dad's eyes locked onto the screen. His wine glass lowered to the table. Trembling. When he finally looked up, the jovial, proud father was gone. In his place was the man who hated being lied to more than anything in the world. Caroline. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Is this true? She couldn't answer. Her mouth opened and closed. Fish-like. Useless. She looked at Mom, pleading. But Mom just sat frozen. Her hand at her throat. Tears spilling silently down her cheeks. The numbers had done their work. The truth was out. There was no putting it back. Caroline snapped like a wire that had finally been pulled too tight. You're a liar! Her voice cracked into a shriek that bounced off the mahogany. She was on her feet, chair scraping backward across the floor. That perfectly painted face twisted into something I didn't recognize. You've always been jealous. You've always hated that Dad was proud of me. You're trying to ruin me. I didn't flinch. I just watched her burn, thinking how much energy it takes to defend a lie you know is about to kill you. I'm not the one who sent 15 transfers to a bank account while the mortgage stayed unpaid. She grabbed at the air like she could pull words out of it. It's complicated. There were expenses. You don't understand, I invested it. The words tumbled out too fast. Desperate. Sloppy. A startup. A brilliant idea. It's just taking a little longer to pay out than I expected. I was going to double it. I was going to pay off the entire mortgage. I was handling it. The lie was so flimsy you could see through it. A startup? A brilliant idea. All that money. Gone into a fantasy she couldn't even name properly. The table sat frozen, Mom gripping her napkin like a life raft. Dad's knuckles white around his wine glass. I let the arithmetic land before I said a word. Numbers were always the truth. 15 months at $4,000 a month is $60,000. I looked straight at my father. Dad. Did she pay the mortgage? He didn't answer. He just turned his head slowly toward my mother. Susan. Mom's face crumpled. The tears she'd been holding broke loose, and her voice came out in a thin, broken whisper. The notices. They stopped for a few months. I thought it was being handled, but then last week, they started again. I found another one. A final notice. Her words were unraveling, falling apart like wet paper. It was in her glove box. I was looking for the insurance card. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. It was folded up in there. Under the registration. She raised her eyes to Caroline. And I saw something I'd never seen in my mother's face before, not just hurt. Understanding, you never paid it. Not once. The final notice was in your glove box. Caroline. The room tilted. I stared at my sister. My brain, doing the math it already knew. $60,000. 15 months. And the house was still 3 payments behind. Teetering on the edge of foreclosure, I kept my voice very quiet. You didn't even pay the mortgage. It's not that simple, she stammered. Backing up. Her hands fumbling in front of her like she could push the words away. There were debts first. I had startup costs. There were other things that needed. Startup costs. I repeated, tasting the lie in my mouth. What kind of startup costs $60,000 and leaves us broke? The question hung in the air. And for the first time that entire night, Caroline didn't have an answer. Her eyes widened. And for one solitary second, I watched the lie die on her lips. She had nothing. No evidence. No records. No proof of any brilliant startup or clever investment. Just a designer purse full of my money and a face going whiter by the second. She looked at Dad, hoping for rescue. His face was granite. Pure. Cold. Disgust. The same look he'd given me 1,000 times. Now aimed at his golden girl. She looked at Mom, who was weeping into her napkin, shoulders shaking like she was falling apart from the inside. And then she looked back at me, her face twisted. Not sadness. Not remorse. Pure. Unfiltered hate. I hate you. She hissed. I hate you. Madison. She grabbed her purse, that designer bag I now realized I'd probably paid for. I hate all of you. She threw her napkin onto her plate of cold roast beef, spun on her heel, and ran. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Then her car engine roared to life and screeched down the street, the sound fading into the night like a scream drowning in water. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that follows a bomb, Mom's sobbing was the only noise left. Dad didn't yell. He didn't rage. He just deflated, sank back into his chair like a balloon with a slow leak. Suddenly looking every one of his 62 years, he put both large hands over his face, elbows resting on the mahogany table beside his abandoned wineglass. "What has she done?" he whispered into his palms. "What has she done?" Mom just kept crying. My girls. My girls. My family. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? Because I stood there in that wreckage, shaking from head to toe. And I thought I'd feel powerful. I thought I'd feel relieved. Instead, I just felt empty, like someone had reached inside me and pulled out everything I'd been holding onto for 31 years. "I have to go," I said. My voice was a croak. Mom's head snapped up. "Madison. No. Please don't leave. Not now. I can't be here right now." I walked out of the dining room, grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, and left my mother's house without my coat. My simple, 3-year-old car started on the first try, and I just drove. No destination. No plan. Just the need to be anywhere but there. I ended up at a lake parking lot I hadn't visited since high school. I don't remember driving there. I just remember the engine ticking as it cooled, and that thick, cold fog of numbness filling my head, keeping the panic at bay. I'd pulled the pin on a grenade that had been sitting on that dinner table for 20 years, and I had no idea who was left standing. When I finally drove home, it was almost midnight. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Mom was at the sink, scrubbing the gravy stain on her white tablecloth until her hands were raw. She came back. She whispered, without turning around, "While you were gone." She packed a suitcase. She took her jewelry. Her perfume. She left this. She handed me a crumpled note. Weighted down by a water glass on Caroline's dresser, my sister's room was ransacked, drawers pulled out, clothes thrown everywhere. Her empty jewelry box gaping open like a wound. The note said, "Don't panic. I'll fix it." That was it. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I'll explain." Just "I'll fix it." The delusion was breathtaking. Even now, after blowing up our family's entire foundation, she still thought she was the one in control. Dad emerged from his study that morning with no rage in him at all. He walked up the stairs like a man wading through water, looked at the note, looked at the empty room, and sank down in the hallway, back against the wall, head in his hands. The great CEO, the patriarch, broken. I didn't cry. I felt nothing but a cold, hard clarity. This was a problem, and I was the only one left who knew how to solve problems. I went straight back into that dining room and turned it into my command center. Laptop open, printer humming, and 15 bank transfer confirmations laid out in a neat grid, 15 times $4. Ling ling ling. $60,000 of my money funneled into my sister's account, and from there, I was about to find out exactly where it went. I couldn't touch her bank records. That would have been illegal. But I didn't need to. I started with the parts of her life she'd plastered all over the internet. And it told its own story. The Mexico work conference tagged at a beach resort. Margaritas in frame. Captions so exhausting. The company car she'd announced like a promotion. The designer bags. The dinner photos. The brunches with friends I'd never met. Every single post was a performance. Staged. Curated. Polished until it gleamed. And paid for by me. Have you ever had to scroll through a family member's life looking for proof that they spent yours? The breakthrough came at 1120 that night. When Mom shuffled into the dining room holding a crumpled piece of paper, her fingers trembling. She'd found it in Caroline's trash can, buried under a pile of discarded clothes. A credit card statement. 3 weeks old. Maxed out. Not the kind of maxed out that comes from one bad month. The kind that comes from months of quiet bleeding. But that wasn't the part that made my blood run cold. It was the cash advances. 3 of them. 1,000,000. 000. Each. All inside a single week. And beneath that, comme a lime. 0, 0, 0, recurring payment to a name I'd never heard in my life, Evan March. Labeled as a business expense. I typed the name into my laptop at 1137 p.m. and the screen filled with March Ventures. The website was almost insultingly fake. Stock photos of skyscrapers nobody owned. Generic words like synergy, growth projection, angel investing. It looked like it had been assembled in one afternoon by someone with a credit card and a cheap website builder. The business address was a P.O. box in Delaware. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in professional grifting. Evan March had registered LLCs in 3 different states, every single one dissolved within 2 years of opening. He left a trail of furious reviews scattered across investment forums. Each one posted, buried under noise, and eventually deleted. People called him a fraud, a charmer, a man in a nice suit who made your savings disappear like a card trick, and every warning was dismissed as sour grapes from partners who got cold feet. He was a predator dressed as a visionary. He'd found my sister desperate, drowning, starving for our father's approval, and he'd bled her dry. But he'd made one fatal mistake. He conned a narcissist without ever checking who stood behind her. He hadn't counted on the sister, the accountant, the one who kept every receipt. The doorbell rang at 2:14 on a Thursday afternoon, a sound so ordinary it felt violent. We hadn't had a visitor since the scandal broke. Mom jumped. Dad appeared in the study doorway. Silence. I set my laptop down and stood. Mom opened the door. And there he was. Evan March. Late 30s. Handsome in that slick, careless way. A tailored blue suit. No tie. An expensive watch catching the light. And a smile so bright and easy you'd never guess it was built on stolen money. Susan Cole. His voice was smooth as the suit. I'm Evan March. I'm a business partner of Caroline's. Is she here? Mom couldn't speak. He leaned in, lowering his voice like he was letting her in on a secret. I know things have been tense. Family finances. Right. That's why I'm here. I brought the prospectus for your investment. I wanted to walk you and Richard through the projected growth. He actually thought he could con us in our own house. He thought we were just 2 confused old parents and a boring daughter. I stepped out of the dining room, and his eyes flickered. I wasn't part of his plan. And you are Madison, I said. The one who paid for your investment. His smile vanished. He walked past me into the dining room like he owned it and stopped cold. My laptop. My stack of bank printouts. My case file. Laid out in clean rows. Dad followed. And for the first time in days, the CEO was back. You took my daughter's money. Evan laughed. He actually laughed. He slapped a glossy folder on the table. Stock photos of happy people in meetings. Richard. I didn't take anything. Caroline is a partner. She believed in me. She's a visionary. He thought charm would save him. He was wrong. I picked up the prospectus and flipped it open. March Ventures. Registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. LLC dissolved 11 months ago. I turned a page. And these projected growth charts, I tapped one. This is a $19 template. You didn't even change the default font. His face went pale. He'd been dealing with Caroline, who was impressed by shiny things. He was not prepared for the woman who reads the fine print. You took $60,000 from my family, I said, and I want to know where it is. He opened his mouth to spin another lie. But he never got the chance because at that exact moment, We heard tires screeching in the driveway. Caroline slammed through the front door before the engine even died. She froze on the threshold, matted hair. The same crumpled silk blouse from 2 nights ago. A stained overnight bag clutched to her chest. When she saw Evan, every drop of color drained from her face. Evan, her voice came out small. Shattered. Like a child's. "What are you doing here?" Evan's charm snapped back on like a switch. "Caroline. Baby. I'm here to fix it. I'm explaining everything to your parents." He opened his arms like he expected her to run into them. "The investment. The lawyers, I'm protecting us." Caroline stared at him. And for one terrible moment, she actually wavered. I saw desperate hope flicker in her eyes. "You promised," she whispered. "You took the last 10,000. You said you'd fix it." And just like that, the whole pathetic scam collapsed in the open. She wasn't his partner. She was his mark. The well he kept coming back to. Evan recovered fast. "Babe. That 10,000 was for the lawyers to protect our assets. I was protecting you." His voice was low, soothing, a hypnotist's voice. And Caroline, drowning, actually started to nod. "The lawyers?" I stepped forward. "You're wrong. Evan, you're not protecting anyone." He sneered at me. "And who are you, the accountant? Go back to your little numbers." "Sweetheart." I set my phone down on the table. "I'm the one who contacted the police 2 days ago. The moment I found your name, my file, the bank transfers, the fraud report, all of it went to them." "You didn't." His voice cracked. "I did. This stopped being a business dispute when you took $60,000 under false pretenses. That's called wire fraud. And I think they're right on time." The red and blue lights swept across the living room walls. A heavy, official knock. Dad opened the door like a man in a dream. 2 officers stood on the doorstep. "We're responding to a fraud claim made by a Ms. Problem. Madison Cole. Is there an Evan March at this residence?" Evan backed toward the kitchen. But the second officer was already inside. "I want my lawyer." The handcuffs clicked. The loudest sound I'd ever heard. They read him his rights in our foyer. Surrounded by Mom's fall pumpkins, and Caroline slid down the wall, her legs giving out, and sobbed. Not a quiet cry. A full body. Gasping. Ugly wail. "I just wanted Dad to be proud of me." She choked out. "I just wanted, I'm so sorry." The police led Evan out. Dad stood frozen in the doorway, his authority crumbling. And me, I stood holding my case file, watching it all, feeling nothing except, for the first time in my entire life in that house, I didn't feel small the day after the arrest. I went to the bank instead of to the office. I brought the police report, my firm's financials, and the cold arithmetic of everything we'd lost. I didn't ask for favors. I laid out the facts and made a proposal, a deferment, a restructuring, and my signature, assuming the loan. The manager studied me for a long moment, then nodded. The house wasn't foreclosed. It just changed owners on paper. Anyway, Mom and Dad became my tenants. Though I never once used that word out loud, the trial came 3 months later. Evan March had scammed 4 other women before Caroline, 4 other families. My file was the one that finally brought him down. Caroline testified. I watched her walk to the stand, hands shaking, voice barely above a whisper. He said I was a visionary. She said, he said he loved me. It was the first honest thing I'd ever heard her say. The judge gave him 3 years in state prison, weeks after the verdict. Dad found me at the kitchen table going through the bills. He sat down across from me and just watched for a long time. "We failed both of you," he said quietly. "We put her on a pedestal she couldn't breathe on. and we put you in the shadows. We never saw you. Madison. His voice cracked. I'm so proud of you. After everything, the betrayal, the lies, the handcuffs, those were the words that finally broke me. I put my head down among the spreadsheets and wept. Spring came. Mom brought her easel down from the attic and started painting again. Caroline got a job as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic, and she began paying me back $50 at a time. Every single week. Not because I asked, because she wanted to. Before I left for Seattle, she handed me an old photograph of us as kids. On the back she'd written, "Sometimes love means facing the truth even when it hurts." I drove away the next morning. I saw them on the porch reel. Messy. Honest. Family doesn't end when it breaks. It begins when it rebuilds. And for the first time in my life, my books were perfectly, completely balanced. Looking back now, I understand what that $60,000 really was. It was never the price of peace. It was the price I paid to avoid the truth. Peace bought with silence doesn't last. It just rots beneath the surface, ticking like a time bomb, until somebody finally finds the courage to speak. And when I finally did, the explosion broke us all. But here's the thing about breaking it makes room for rebuilding. My father still has the house, but it's no longer his kingdom. He spends his mornings in the garden with my mother now, learning to listen instead of command. Mom's easel is back in the living room, covered in paint instead of dust. And Caroline, the golden sister who never paid for anything in her life, sends me $50 every week from her receptionist job at the vet clinic. It'll take years to pay back what she took, but she's finally real. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It did. It shattered. But when I look at my family now real, messy, honest, I understand that the truth was never the enemy. The lies were, and the most expensive thing I ever bought wasn't peace. It was the lesson that love means facing the truth even when it hurts. If you've ever been the invisible one at your own dinner table, holding everything together while someone else takes the credit, I hope you believe this. Your voice matters, and you don't have to shrink to be loved. Share your story in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, like and subscribe for more stories of justice and rebuilding.